All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike. Thank you for attending our panel on how to build a financially sound e-commerce business. Today we have Abir Syed, we have Kayley Perry, we have Matt Putra, and we have Nima Sotoadeh. So I'll start with Abir and just quickly introduce everyone. While VP Finance at a startup, Abir had the unusual opportunity to take over and scale an e-commerce brand they had acquired. Dealing with every aspect of the brand, he developed a love for e-commerce that then led him to found a company called UpCounting, an e-commerce accounting firm. He provides fractional CFO services to their clients and also does some media buying on the side, which helps connect the dots between marketing and finance for e-commerce brands. Next is Kayley Perry, also a CPA. Kayley is the accounting operations manager at Unloop Accounting. Unloop is also an e-commerce accounting firm, more on the bookkeeping side, handling all things bookkeeping and monthly accounting, accrual accounting for anybody selling physical products. Next, we have Matt Putra, who is a fractional CFO and an e-commerce CFO at Eightx. So Matt has served over 60 e-commerce brands and agencies worldwide, with revenues ranging from 5 to 120 million per year. As the founder of Eightx, he helps businesses scale efficiently through strategic financial support, comprehensive bookkeeping, and enhancing operational systems. Before Eightx, Matt was a CFO at a private equity group, managing over 500 million in investments across Canada. And last but certainly not least, we have Nima Sotoadeh. Nima is somebody who's actually built a brand, so he's unique on this panel. He's the founder of Broya, a Canadian bone broth company that has grown from a bootstrap startup to mid-seven-figure revenue. Through hard work and dedication, Nima has established Broya as a respected name in nutritious, high-quality bone broth. His commitment to wellness and quality has been key to the company's steady growth and success in the health food industry. BroyaLiving.com. So thanks everyone for coming today. I hope you will get some accounting and finance tips from the experts on this panel. We'll start with you, Abir. Obviously, accounting is an expense, right? It's not a super sexy topic, but everyone needs it. So when you think about accounting, when you think about finance, fractional CFO services, bookkeeping, what do people actually need? And at what point should they start thinking about investing in their finance team?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when thinking about building out your finance function, I oversimplify a little bit, but I like to think about it as coming in 3 stages. So at the beginning, you have, let's just call it your basic bookkeeping phase, where essentially you want to keep track. It's a transactional data thing. So you just want to make sure that you're paying attention to all the transactions that are taking place in your business, all the ins and outs of various dollars, and making sure you know what there are and what they're doing. This is something you need from day one. It's not fun, but even at a minimum, just for tax purposes, it has to get done. So even if you don't want to be doing it as a founder at a very early phase, you should be doing it yourself at a minimum. The second phase is where you actually start to try to extract value from all this data you're putting together. So that's what we'll call the reporting phase. So it includes, your main financial statements, so the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, your profit and loss. But it can also include ad hoc reporting, like what's my contribution margin from DTC versus Amazon, or what's my gross profit by product category. There's a lot of ways that you can slice your data to be able to get insights out of it, and ultimately, that's where you start to actually derive value from all that bookkeeping that's done in stage 1. You're trying to actually understand what the financial health of your business is. Like, it's good to see revenue, it's good to see ROAS, but at the end of the day, an e-commerce business is still a business, and that's where you get that kind of insight. The third phase is a bit of an extension of that, so there is a bit of overlap, but it's where you start to take that historical data, you observe the trends, you start to extrapolate out, you start to put in assumptions, do some scenario analysis, and you start to see, okay, what can the future look like if I make that decision or that decision? What sort of strategies are available to me? And then you start to incorporate also the resources side of it. So how much cash do I have? If you're fortunate enough to have a lot of cash, where do I invest it? If you don't have enough, should I raise it from investors? Should I get some from debt? So eventually, as you scale, all of those functions need to be taken care of, but they come in stages as you actually get larger and have more complex needs. So then it comes to the second part of what you were saying, which is, okay, yeah, accounting doesn't inherently have an ROI. It's one of those things where the ROI is a function of how well you actually use the information. In the same way that I can go and set up a workout plan and decide which days I'm going to work out and which muscles I'm going to do on which sets and how many reps, but if I don't actually go to the gym, I get zero value from it. So ultimately, the value really does come from how well you use that data. And to be able to achieve that ROI, a simple way of thinking about it is, let's say, cost benefit. So early days, the business is small, there's not a lot going on, you have more time than you have money, so you can't scale super, super rapidly. So your cost, the cost of your own time to do that work is low enough that it can make sense to do that. And the benefits aren't so significant because there isn't just such a large volume of data. The decision making is not that difficult. And frankly, when there's so few transactions happening, even if you don't really do good accounting, you kind of just in the back of your mind know what's happening. There's a few bucks moving around, you know what they are. But as the business scales, things become more complex, there's more difficult accounting transactions happening that leaves more room for error. There's a much larger volume of things happening. The actual processes in the business become more complex. And more importantly, the cost per unit of time that you put into doing accounting and finance yourself versus scaling your brand, managing your team, negotiating with suppliers, that balance starts to shift. So there is a point at where you actually should start to outsource. So kind of taking all that yapping and put it into like a very simple sort of way to think about this, the point at which you should start thinking about outsourcing really depends on three things. A, your complexity. So if the accounting becomes complex enough where the risk of error is a little bit higher, that you might make mistakes, and it's just a lot of shit that you have to manage. So you're selling on multiple channels. If you're doing your own manufacturing, there's a lot of AR and AP to manage. You need to be doing more cash flow management. That complexity is one thing to consider. The second thing is speed. So if you're running like a side hustle type business, it's kind of moving casually, scaling at a nice, calm rate, then you can be a little bit, lackadaisical about when you get your data, how you analyze it. You can take your time, it's not a big deal. But if you're, pushing the envelope a little bit more, you're spending a lot of money, you're scaling aggressively, you're operating on thinner margins because you want to really acquire at the fastest clip that you can. At that point, the speed with which you need to get that data is a lot more important. You need to analyze it a lot faster. So you close a month, you want to be able to see how that month went a few days later. So in a situation like that, realistically, you just need a dedicated resource to do all that work because you don't have the time to do it yourself. And the third one is probably just the easiest rule of thumb for anybody in the audience who's like, hey, just shut up and give me an answer. Just size. I would say you get to let's say 50K a month in revenue, that's probably a good rule of thumb. At that point, you probably should be outsourcing.
Very well said. I think you touched on a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abir. I don't really have any follow-up questions. Yeah, 50K a month seems like a good time, if not to hire someone to at least start thinking about these kinds of things, right? Once you get to the 1-2 million a year revenue mark, maybe getting a bit more serious about that, but obviously depending on your business. Kayley, for you, Abir kind of mentioned mistakes in his answer, right? Obviously with accounting, there's things that can go wrong. With tax, there are things that can go wrong. So for a young brand just starting out, or somebody more further along on their journey, what are some things you have seen go wrong? Whether it's on the bookkeeping side, on the tax side, the accounting side. Can you share some stories or some examples?
Yeah, so I guess the short answer is what can't go wrong, because we kind of do see it all. But I just want to do something here with the audience for a second. Just raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you've ever been impacted or know of a founder that's been impacted by inaccurate or not on time financial reporting. Okay, I just want you to keep your hands up because I would like a picture for my social media if that's allowed. Only that many people?
No, me and your selfie.
All right, thanks guys.
Just take a selfie at this point.
Thanks guys, yeah. So yeah, accuracy and timeliness are often two of the main reasons why clients come to us. So timeliness, are you getting your financial information in a timely manner so that you can use that information to make business decisions. If you're not, I think the solution is a little simpler. You probably just need to get a new accountant or new bookkeeper. Accuracy is kind of the tougher one to solve because it can really make or break your business. So to say that a set of financial statements are accurate, there's a whole pile of information that goes into that. But when I say that it can make or break your business, we have really seen that happen day to day, because you think about a business who's, looking to go out and get funding. If your financials aren't up to date, then who's going to lend you money? Or looking for a potential investor, or maybe thinking about getting acquired. Due diligence, you need proper financial statements to stand up to these things. So I would say the two areas of accuracy that we find most commonly we see people make mistakes are probably, number one, cost of goods sold and inventory valuation. And number two would be sales tax. So I'll explain kind of what I mean a little bit on both of those without getting too accounting technical on you all. If you do want to geek out about, cost of goods sold and inventory valuation, we do have a booth outside and we'd be happy to talk about it. But basically when it comes to, we're all in this e-commerce conference, so we're all in the business of selling things. On your financial statement, when you sell a thing, you have to value that in your income statement as a cost of goods sold. The same thing at the end of every reporting period, you have to know the value of your inventory on hand, your inventory in transit, any prepaid inventory. So whatever system you decide to go with, and there are a few that you can choose from, it has to be consistent and I would say systemized. You can't just pull numbers out of thin air and say, oh, I feel like my inventory is worth this. That doesn't necessarily fly with the CRA or an investor. So yeah, some indicators that your cost of goods sold might not be accurate. If you look at, say, picture a 12-month profit and loss statement, if your margin is kind of doing a lot of this, it probably means that your systems aren't great for measuring cost of goods sold. If your margins are kind of doing more like this, maybe some fluctuations up and down, then chances are you've got a better handle on it, just as a gut check. But the reason why this is important is because, I'll give you an example. We actually had a client who was using Sin 7. So they had an operations person on the ground. I know, Sin 7, everyone's like, oh. But they had an operations person on the ground that was actually keeping track of all the inventory movements in the system. And what they tasked us with was investigating why their gross margin had so much variability. At the same time, they were going through the process of due diligence with a few potential investors. And when we kind of unraveled why the gross margin had so much variability, there were some pretty significant accounting adjustments that we had to post, which were, post-dated. They were 6 months to a year behind, and it ended up causing them the sale of the business. So when you think about inaccurate books can significantly impact the future of your business, that's why it's so important. So yeah, that's cost of goods sold and inventory, but sales tax, I think everybody kind of tenses up a little when they hear the word sales tax, because it's not everybody's favorite topic. But I think the best thing to know is that know what you don't know and know when to call in the experts. Any accountant or bookkeeper can file a sales tax return, but when you step into the world of e-commerce, it does get a little more complicated because there's a couple of reasons. I'd say number one is that you have the ability to sell globally very easily. And so you're not just exposed to, your provincial or Canadian sales tax laws, but US and even international. So knowing when to pull in the experts to help you make sure you're compliant with those rules is important. The second is that I don't know how many e-com founders in the room have heard of marketplace facilitator laws. Those laws were brought in a few years ago to help make it easier for marketplaces like Amazon and Etsy to collect and remit your sales tax so that you don't have to worry about it. But where it gets a little tricky is that depending on what province you're in, what areas you're selling to, they may or may not, they'll collect, but they may or may not remit for you. So just having a basic understanding of that, I think it would be an unhappy realization to learn that you've been collecting sales tax or PST for X period of time and thinking that Amazon has been remitting that to the government just to learn that they haven't. So important to know what you don't know when it comes to marketplace facilitator laws. And the last thing on sales tax is kind of specific to Amazon, just because it's an area where we've seen so many disasters happen. You just assume that, Amazon is a beast of its own, that the folks at Amazon should know and be the experts in sales tax laws. It really turns out that they're not. And you can't just assume that they are charging you the correct sales tax on your fees, because we've seen a few cases. We're actually working with a Canadian client now based out in BC, and they're anticipating a $100,000 refund from a blend between Amazon and the CRA for sales tax on their advertising and seller fees that they've been incorrectly charged by Amazon. So just think about the ROI on their bookkeeping fees. They onboard it with us, and we noticed in their Seller Central account that their sales tax registration number wasn't up to date in one very specific part in Amazon Seller Central, and because of that, they had been charged $100,000 too much sales tax. So we can't just assume that what we're paying is accurate, because there's sometimes a likely chance that it's not. So when you talk about cash flow forecasting, planning, and investing, a $100,000 sales tax refund can significantly change that depending on the size of your business. So basically that's all to say is what can go wrong is everything. So just knowing when to pull in the experts.
Wow, that was something. Hopefully not everyone's like really afraid or anything like that. I think it's fair to say that like it's also really hard to do this. Like that's why companies like UpCounting, like Unloop, like Eightx, that's why we exist. Like you have to figure out how much inventory is in stock all the time, what's the cost of that inventory, how does that flow through to COGS. Then we have the whole sales tax piece. We have the marketplaces and how they integrate with your accounting software. If you're able to do this on your own by yourself, that's great. But if you're not, that's okay. And companies like us are here if you need us. So moving on to Matt now. Thanks, Kayley. Matt, a question we get all the time on calls or from our clients. Everyone has their own unique industry, their own product, their own competitor. Every business is so unique. But a question we get all the time is, am I doing well? Like, how do I know if my margins are high enough? Am I deploying cash where I should be? Are there any metrics that you use in your own practice that brands can calculate and kind of assess whether they're doing well in their own market?
Yeah, so there's a few, and I think one of the first things that you have to do is figure out what does doing well mean for you. So by way of hands, is anybody looking to exit their business at some point in the future? Yeah. Is anybody looking to exit in the next 2 years? Or in the next 10 years? Are you looking to exit at around 10, 20 million or 100 million? Each of those people are going to answer what does doing well mean differently. That being said, there's about 5 things I think you should be looking at. The first one is, we all know, contribution margin as a percentage. So if you sell something for $100, what's left over after COGS and shipping and payment processing and ads? If it's $20, your contribution margin is 20%. You have to watch that like a hawk. On average, it should be, if you're in D2C, above 20%. If you're in wholesale, it can be 35%. but you don't want it to be too high either. If you're in D2C and it's 35%, what that means is someone else, you're not investing hard enough in getting new customers. Someone else can come in and buy your customers from you. If you're in wholesale and it's too high, it means you need to reinvest in shopper marketing, trade spend, blades, promos, all these things to drive more sell-through at wholesale. So if it's too high, you're not investing hard enough. Another thing that we need to think about is contribution margin just in dollars. So from $100, it's $20 you get to keep. But now, what if you're doing $1 million a month? How many contribution margin dollars are you keeping? That number should just be growing. So I would say on a rolling 3 to 6 month average, that number should be growing all the time. Why? Because your fixed costs will be fixed, and if those numbers grow, that means you get more dollars in your pocket as an owner. Another thing is GPLTV, so gross profit lifetime value divided by CAC, so GPLTV to CAC. CAC is your customer acquisition cost. Most people will measure LTV in terms of revenue, so how much revenue does a customer bring in with you over the course of time. Okay? I want you to think about it in terms of how much gross profit do you make from that customer over time. Why? Because it's a true measure of what you're actually making from them. And as a minimum, 3 to 1, okay? Ideally, it's gonna be 5, maybe 10 to 1, GPLTV to CAC. If you're gonna get acquired and you want to maximize your valuation, aim for 10. You will get amazing dollars when you exit if your GPLTV to CAC is 10. Another thing is your CAC payback time frame. So how fast, when you buy a customer, let's say for $100, how fast you get that $100 back. Generally speaking, if you don't have a high repurchase rate or expensive product, you want to be first purchase profitable. So you want to pay $80 and you want to make $10-20 from that customer right away. If you have a decently high repurchase rate, some apparel companies do, then it can be 2 to 3 months. If you're a subscription, it could be 6 months to 12 months. But if it's 12 months, you better be VC funded. It is brutal to run a business on a CAC payback of 12 months. It's just a lot of cash outlay. And the last thing that I want to say on that is SKU velocity. So when you most of us will probably have more than one SKU. They should be turning over well. What does well mean? So think of what you started with. Your very first SKU, the one that's your hero SKU now. When you launch something, the goal should be for the new thing to do probably 20% of the velocity of your hero SKU. Less than that, and an acquirer thinks that you don't really know what to launch next. You don't really know how to connect with your customers. But if it's on track to do 20, an acquirer will think, oh, these people understand their customers. Their customers want to buy more from them, and you'll get good money for that. In retail, if your SKU velocity is below your competitors, you're going to get booted off the shelf, right? And you probably have to deal with that. Yeah. So manage your SKU velocity, and if SKUs are not on track to be that 20%, cut them. Don't keep buying it. Don't keep trying. I think probably within 6 months to a year, if you think they're not going to be on track, don't continue to invest in that SKU. Cut it, find something else, move on. And those are the 5 things. So again, contribution margin as a percentage, contribution margin just as dollars, GP, LTV to CAC, CAC payback, and SKU velocity.
And I learned a lot there, actually. Matt is smart.
There you go. Thanks, Matt. I think there's a lot there. If you do want to chat with Matt more, he'll be outside. Fractional CFO at Eightx. So thank you. Nima, I wanted to give you a little bit more time than the rest of us since you are the founder of your own broth company. You've built it to mid 7-figure revenue, an amazing accomplishment. Can you just kind of tell us your story? And if you want to share any financial or non-financial milestones or metrics, that would be great. But just like, how did you do this? How did you bootstrap this company to where it is today?
Yeah, I mean, it was super difficult, but starting the business, I didn't have really any money. I had, debt, coming from doing an MBA. So, you know, then no one was really looking to give me money either. And so I actually raised like $50,000 in debt from the BDC Futurepreneur. Used that to kind of spark the business. And yeah, I mean, it was a very few tough early years because I was very early on the bone broth trend, especially here in Canada. You know, to the point where like I almost shut the business down. You know, luckily I didn't because, you know, the year where I started to really pivot into e-commerce rather than retail, that's when our growth and, you know, things just started to kind of happen just more effortlessly. Like we were getting new customers, we had a good CPA, and this was around 2020 during COVID too, which obviously the COVID bump helped a little bit too. And so, yeah, we went from essentially like, you know, like mid six figures to over $1 million in 2020, 2021. And then from there, we went from like, you know, we doubled our growth. Last year, we had a bit more of a difficult year. We grew like 30%. And then this year, we're going to double again. So it's kind of, you know, it's been really nice to kind of see that growth. And it's been an interesting like journey through the finance side of it as well. You know, for me, I'm a bootstrapped guy. I'm not looking to raise VC or, you know, at least right now, we're not really looking to raise capital. And it's really about like, how do we stay profitable while we grow? And, you know, growing like 100% this year, it's not really the easiest thing to do when you're trying to focus on profitability. So I think just as a founder, my gut check thing is like, okay, how profitable do I want to be? And, you know, how much do I want to invest in growth? And, you know, what's that going to do for me, you know, kind of down the road? And, you know, my mind is on eventually exiting. But really, it's like, even if the exit doesn't come, then, you know, I'm just trying to build a good business that's profitable and, you know, spitting out good cash flow every year. So, you know, when thinking about exiting, the accounting side is super important. So we started to think about how do we clean our accounting really early on. Like I would say, like from doing about $1 million in revenue, we started to think about, okay, we were doing cash accounting, we got to move to accrual accounting. That was a huge transition. I had no idea what accrual accounting even was. I'm not like a finance guy at all. So, you know, I brought in a really great fractional CFO, kind of like what Matt does. And you know, that guy's kind of been my main finance guy to help me understand, okay, how do we want to grow? Like what's important in terms of the numbers? You know, how much do we want to invest in marketing? Yada, yada, you know? So yeah, maybe I'll stop there and yeah.
Yeah. Nima, your story is amazing. If there's one piece of advice you can give to founders who are a little bit earlier on in their journey, who are also bootstrapping, where to prioritize their efforts, where to deploy capital, any words of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just like unit economics comes to mind and cash conversion cycle comes to mind. So like I probably would never start an e-com business unless I'm doing, you know, 70% margins at this stage, and that's like delivered to the customer. We're not at 70%, but you know, like we were kind of lucky. We started a bit earlier. CPAs were a bit better. We have a very high LTV and repeat purchase rate and subscription and yada yada. So that kind of helps a lot. Plus now we have retail that we're going into. That's, you know, another channel. But if you're just like a pure play D2C company, I think, you know, like under 70% starts to become really hard. Yeah, just especially where like acquisition costs are these days. And then on the cash conversion cycle side, you know, it's a big term to know. It's like how quick can you actually turn around that inventory? For us, again, like this is actually a big reason why I've been able to bootstrap is I've had a great cash conversion cycle. So I don't pay for inventory until 30 days after the product ships. And so I'm selling product within those 30 days and I'm still not paying for that inventory. So I have a positive cash conversion cycle. Most people don't have that. Most people are paying for inventory. You know, usually it's like, you guys would know more, but usually it's like, you know, before the product ships. Sometimes it's even like 3 months, 6 months before. So like, imagine your run sizes are like, you know, you're dishing out 100K for inventory and you're not seeing that revenue come from that like potentially 6-12 months later, like it's kind of insane, you know? So it makes it really hard to launch a business. So yeah, those two things.
Thanks, Nima. Okay, I think we're just about at time. So just want to thank everyone for joining the panel, and please give it up for all our panel members.
Thank you, everybody.